in this, they get this wrong. So the Arctic is an ocean. It's a frozen ocean surrounded by continents. The North Pole is the geographical North Pole is there in the middle of the frozen ocean. And you see here there's the Arctic Circle, which is about 66.5 degrees north. And if you're inside that Arctic Circle, that is where the sun stays above or below the horizon. So you'll get 24 hours of sunlight or 24 hours of darkness. So there's the Arctic there. It's surrounded by Russia, Alaska, Canada, Greenland. And we are going to the Antarctic. So we're going down to the south, to the other side of the planet. And if you look at that map of Antarctica, you can see that we're surrounded by the Southern Ocean. And that's really important. And that is one of the things that makes this more of an adventure. It's an expedition. It's not an ordinary cruise by any shape or form. This is a proper expedition, proper, you know, we have to take this seriously. We have to sort of give this continent some respect when we get there. And the Southern Ocean surrounds the whole of Antarctica. You've got the icy cold weather fronts coming up from Antarctica, meeting the warmer weather fronts. We've got these huge storms. We've got this area of kind of the most turbulent waters that we have to cross. We have to cross the Drake Passage to get down to Antarctica. So there's also icebergs, there's sometimes fog. So the whole thing is quite an adventure to get down there. And here we are. We call it the last continent. And we call it the last continent because it's the last continent that's been discovered, and it's the last continent to be explored. And it wasn't a complete surprise to find it, because the ancient Greeks, the clever old ancient Greeks, surmised that there was a continent down there, which is why it's called Antarctica. It means opposite to the bear. So Anti is the opposite, and Arctus is the constellation of the bear, which is over the Arctic. So they thought if there's an Arctic frozen continent at one end of the Earth, then there must be a frozen continent at the bottom of the Earth as well, and that is Antarctica. But it took a long time to actually see the continent. Not until 1820 did we actually see the continent. So that's not long ago in terms of exploration of the world. Ferdinand Magellan, he discovered the Straits of Magellan in 1520, and Tierra del Fuego, which is where we're heading towards now. So he thought he'd discovered the southern continent. He said, this is it, I've discovered the southern continent. I've got his Tierra del Fuego, land of fire. But then Francis Drake came along in 1578. He was blown south of Tierra del Fuego. So he went further south than Ferdinand Magellan. And he showed that he showed that the Tierra del Fuego was an island, and south of Tierra del Fuego was this incredibly rough area of ocean, which we now call the Drake Passage. So they were getting closer to the continent, closer and closer. And then in 1772 to 1775, the wonderful James Cook, possibly the greatest seaman of all time, he was circumnavigating the Southern Ocean. And he got so close to the continent. He crossed the Antarctic Circle 3 times, but he actually missed seeing the continent. There was fog. So he didn't actually prove that the continent existed, but he saw all the icebergs coming, and he knew that those icebergs were coming from somewhere. So it was Captain Cook who said, yes, we found the continent. We haven't seen it, but we know it's there. We can see the icebergs. And on the 27th of January, 1775, he said that the continent of Antarctica is doomed by nature to never once feel the warmth of the sun's rays, but to lie forever buried under everlasting snow and ice. And that is where you're going on your holidays. They don't tell you that on the Princess website or the Princess brochures, but that is where we're going. So we're going to this place that they said, don't ever go there, it's too wild, it's too much ice and snow. So we're heading down there now with Captain Cook, Ferdinand Magellan, Francis Drake. We're getting right down to the continent. And after Captain Cook was down there, he wrote in his ship's logs that he saw lots of seals, lots of whales, and this opened up the area to the sealers and the whalers. And the sealers and the whalers, they tended to keep a lot of where they went secret. They didn't make the charts and make it public, but they certainly a big part in exploring.
Buenos días, queridos huéspedes. Este anuncio viene del ponte del capitán Paolo Ravera. Posición al mediodía del nave es latitud 43 grados y 46 segundos y longitud 60 grados y 34 minutos oeste. Distancia recorrida desde Buenos Aires, 731 millas náuticas y 840 millas terrestres. Distancia restante para llegar a Punta Arenas son 750 millas náuticas y 863 millas terrestres. La velocidad media desde la salida de Buenos Aires han sido 17.7 nudos o 20 millas por hora. La hora estimada de llegada a Punta Arenas es el 27 de diciembre, 7 de la mañana hora local. En este momento, profundidad bajo de la quilla, 90 metros. Actualmente navegamos con rumbo sureste hacia Punta Arenas, donde esperemos llegar el 27 de diciembre y fondear con seguridad a las 7 de la mañana. La tierra más cercana es Punta Delgada a estribor, a 150 millas náuticas, que es parte de Península Valdés. La Península Valdés es una península que se adentra en el Océano Atlántico, en el departamento de Viedma, al noroeste de la provincia de Chubut, Argentina. Es una importante reserva natural declarada Patrimonio de la Humanidad por la UNESCO en 1999. La península tiene una superficie de aproximadamente 3.625 kilómetros cuadrados y está conectada al continente por el istmo de Carlos Amiguillo. La ciudad grande más cercana es Puerto Madryn. El único asentamiento en la península es el pequeño pueblo de Puerto Pirámides. La costa está habitada por mamíferos marinos, como leones marinos, elefantes marinos y lobos marinos. Las aguas adyacentes constituyen el criadero más importante del mundo para la ballena franca austral. Condiciones meteorológicas en este momento: cielo nublado, viento noroeste, brisa fresca 15 a 20 nudos, escala Beaufort 5. El estado termal es ligeramente agitado, con olas de 1.5 metros. Temperatura del aire, 16 grados Celsius. Temperatura del mar, 17 grados Celsius. Puesta del sol hoy va a ser a las 8:28 de la noche y salida del sol mañana va a ser a las 5:18 de la mañana. Mañana, por nuestro día de mar, el cielo va a ser parcialmente nublado, con viento del suroeste, brisa fresca 15 a 20 nudos, escala Beaufort 5. Estado del mar, agitado 1.5 metros, temperatura 13 grados Celsius. Por favor, queridos huéspedes, por su propia seguridad, tenga cuidado al caminar por el barco y le rogamos que utilice las pasamanos disponibles. Gracias. Este anuncio va a ser repetido en chino.
女士们、先生们，中午好！这里是来自船长的午间播报。目前，蓝宝石公主号已自布宜诺斯艾利斯航行了731海里，距蓬塔阿雷纳斯剩余航程为750海里。预计抵达蓬塔阿雷纳斯时间为12月27日，当地时间上午7点。我们正沿西南航向驶往蓬塔阿雷纳斯。目前，距我们最近的位地为右舷150海里处的细角，该地位于瓦尔德斯半岛。瓦尔德斯半岛是阿根廷区约克省的东北部别的马行政区，深入大西洋的一个半岛。它是一个重要的自然保护区，于1999年被联合国教科文组织列为世界遗产。该半岛面积约3625平方公里，通过卡洛斯阿维吉诺海峡与大陆相连。半岛上唯一定居的地点是小型村落皮拉彼得港，其海岸线栖息着海狮、象海豹和毛皮海豹等海洋哺乳动物。临近水域是南露脊鲸最重要的繁殖地。 当前的天气情况为多云，西北风15到20节，浪高1.5米，气温为16摄氏度，海水温度为17摄氏度。今日日落时间为20点28分，明日日出时间为早上5点18分。明日海上天气预报为局部多云，伴有15到20节的西南风，并有高1.5米左右的清浪，气温在13摄氏度左右。安全提示：为了您的自身安全，请在船上行走时小心谨慎，并充分利用各处提供的扶手。感谢您的聆听，祝您在蓝宝石公主号度过美好的下午时光。
So sorry about that. I had no idea that was going to happen. Just a bit of a mistake somewhere along the line with the programming, but we'll carry on, pretend that never happened. So thank you for your patience and for hanging around. So yeah, as I said, this was all in the days of sail. So difficult to get to Antarctica, so hard. Luckily for us, we can sail down here aboard the beautiful Sapphire Princess. We can have 5-course dinners and look out the window at the continent. So yeah, we're doing it in luxury. So boy, are we lucky. So this is where we're heading towards. We're heading towards the Antarctica. And from this map here, you can see that there are 2 lines marked out. There's the 60 degrees south line here, which is the perfect circle, which is just an imaginary line of 60 degrees south. Everything inside there is the Antarctic. So once we cross there, we are in the Antarctic region. So the continent is Antarctica, and we're going into the Antarctic region. So we're not going to wait to kind of get there to see it. It's the whole experience of getting down there. That's what we're going to enjoy. We're going to cross over into the Antarctic region. We'll start seeing icebergs before we get to the continent, and you'll start to feel that icy cold of the wind fairly quickly once we get into that region. But as I said, the 60 degree south is kind of an imaginary line. This line here is the real line, this wobbly line around here, that actually exists, and that is called the convergence. And that is where all the icy cold water from the continent meets the warmer water from the warmer areas of the world. And there's not very much mixing of this. In the Arctic, we have lots of mixing between the warmer waters, the Gulf streams that go up and move around. With the Antarctic, that cold icy water kind of isolates the continent, and there's a barrier, there's a boundary around the Antarctic region called the convergence, where the icy cold water sinks down below the warmer water that's coming towards Antarctica. And that is often marked by some fog, so we often go through some foggy areas. The captain will tell us, if you're up on the bridge, you'll see the temperature suddenly drops, and the currents are mixing up the nutrients from the ocean. So we often get a lot of wildlife around that area. There's often whales, there's seabirds. So we usually can actually see when we cross the convergence, and you'll certainly feel it, because that's when you can feel that Antarctic chill. So they're the 2 lines marked on there, but a little bit closer to the continent will be the Antarctic Circle. We don't actually cross over the Antarctic Circle, but we're very, very close, so we won't get those complete 24-hour midsummer days of sunlight. But we will see, because we're so close to Midsummer's Day, we will see the sun dipping and coming up again. So it's going to be pretty amazing to see that, especially New Year's Eve, when we're down there somewhere. So that's going to be quite a wonderful experience to spend New Year down there and to see. We won't actually see the midnight sun, but we'll see very close to that. So that is where we're heading. We can see that we jump across here. So we come across from South America to the Antarctic Peninsula. When I first started doing this, the very first time Princess came down here, we came all the way down from South Africa, and we sailed past Tristan da Cunha and down to Antarctica that way, and that was about 2 weeks of sea days to get here. So luckily for us, we'll be in Ushuaia, and then we kind of have 1 day to get across the Drake Passage, and then we'll be there. And this is the two sides of the convergence. So the Antarctic side of the convergence, you can see Elephant Island in the South Shetlands, and you can see the difference between the Falkland Islands on the other side of the convergence. So you can see that difference being inside the Antarctic makes to us. And if we just think generally, what is the Antarctic continent like? There are no native people. The people from Tierra del Fuego, the indigenous people, the Yagan, the Alkalooth, they didn't make it that far across to the top of Antarctica. We know it's a source of cold. It chills the whole of the southern continent. It's 5.5 million square miles, and it is almost completely ice covered. There are no exploitable mineral sources because it is too expensive to get anything that is there. So we can't exploit those mineral resources. Plus, with the Antarctic Treaty, that is agreed that that will not happen. So indefinitely, that will not happen. And here we are. This is the Antarctic continent. There are three factors that rule down here. There's the cold, the wind, and the altitude. And Antarctica holds the world record for each of those three things. So Antarctica is the world's highest continent, and this is what most of the Antarctic looks like. I think this is so beautiful. You might think, oh, you know, it's not that much, but this is what it looks like. We are coming to the Antarctic Peninsula, so we see some of the most beautiful areas because we see the variety of the rocky coastlines and the wildlife, but the majority of it looks like this. So even if you travelled right the way across Antarctica, you wouldn't see very much difference. So where we're going, we get to see the very best of the continent. And this is the Antarctic Plateau, and this was first discovered by Shackleton on his Nimrod expedition in 1907-22, 1909. And this is the largest single mass of ice on Earth. So if this ice sheet melted, then the world's oceans would rise by about 60 to 65 metres. So this is a colossal amount of ice held down here in Antarctica. And on average, the elevation is about 3,000 metres. So this is pretty much 3 miles of ice on top of the continent. So all of the snow that's fallen down here in the past 45.5 million years has built up on top of the continent, up to, in some places, about 3 miles deep. And it's accumulated to form this huge ice sheet that covers the whole of the continent. So underneath this ice sheet, there's a coastline, there's mountain ranges, there's valleys, there's plains. But the thing that makes Antarctica different to any of the other continents in the world is that it is located over the South Pole. So when as it's located at the South Pole, the heat from the sun hits at a kind of incident angle, so it's spread out so it doesn't get very hot. Inside the Antarctic Circle, you'll have 24 hours of darkness, so there's no radiation from the sun. It's so high that most of that solar radiation just goes straight out into space, so it's not held there. The air is so dry, it's so cold, it doesn't hold water, so we don't get the clouds forming. So there's no insulation stopping the cold just going straight into space. And also it's white, and that's called the albedo effect, when the light just bounces off, so it's not absorbed into the continent. So you can see how all these factors kind of build up to make this incredibly coldest continent on Earth. And this is what it would look like. So this is the continent as we see it now. If you took away all of the ice, that's what you would see. So that's what the continent looks like underneath all of that ice. And there are fossils on Antarctica, the southern beech tree fossils, the same trees you find in New Zealand. And as the continent kind of drifted down over the South Pole, as the plate tectonics and it came down here, it's been covered over with ice. But you can see where once there were the trees and forests covering the continent. And if you cut through it, that's kind of what you would see. So you can see that the ice, this is a core that scientists have cored down into the ice. But just from this diagram, you can see underneath the mountains, this is a lake. So underneath the ice, the pressure of that ice warms the temperature, and there are lakes underneath the ice sheet. So this is Lake Vostok, and for a long time, scientists thought that Lake Vostok had been isolated, and the life that you would find in there had been there for sort of 45 million years. But we kind of know now that all this water is like a big irrigation, it's like a big plumbing system on the whole of the continent, and water moves around. So it's not just a stable lump of ice, there's water moving around, the glaciers are kind of moving on this water underneath. So it's an incredible place. Wilkes Land is one area of Antarctica where it's about 3 miles of ice down here. On average, it's about a mile deep of ice. And that's kind of what makes up this polar plateau. So we've got the high elevations of the polar plateau combined with its high latitudes. The long sunless winters mean that the temperatures are the lowest in the world. So falling as low as about minus 93 degrees Celsius. And that's where we're going on our summer holiday. That's great, isn't it? We are heading down there of our own free will. Nobody's making us go. We just want to go and see this place. And I think that's amazing that you guys want to come and see Antarctica, because that you know, to be interested to come and see this incredible continent down there. So that's where we're heading. I'm going to leave, there's a little short film, but that isn't going to work in here, so we'll leave that and we'll have a look at that when we're in the theatre. So here we are, the coldest recorded temperature is minus 93.2 degrees, and that was recorded using remote sensing from space. Minus 89.2 degrees was at Vostok Station from ground measurements. So these are cold temperatures. These are continental temperatures. In the Arctic, a lot of the temperatures are taken around sea level, around the ocean, whereas in Antarctica, these are like at the tops of the mountain temperatures. So there are, I think in the Arctic, there's temperatures of about minus 50, but that tends to be more in the continent around the Arctic. So yeah, the Antarctic wins hands down as the coldest place on Earth. And because it's so hostile in most of Antarctica, all of the wildlife, all of the penguins, all the seals, the birds, when they come there in the summer to breed, they all come around the edges. So there's very little on the actual polar plateau at all. And if that wasn't enough, Antarctica is also the windiest continent. So we've got the coldest, the highest, the windiest continent so far. So these are the world records for all of these things. And as I said, it's very high elevation. The cold air sinks down, the warm air rises up, cold air sinks down, and it flows down off the ice sheet down towards sea level. We get these big katabatic winds as it comes down off the continent, and it is incredibly windy in some places in the Antarctic, and it holds the record for being the windiest place in the world. And this is Commonwealth Bay. So this is an old photo taken in the Australian Antarctic expedition, so Douglas Mawson's expedition in 1911 to 1914, and this was where the Australian Antarctic expedition set up their base. They didn't really know it was the windiest place in Antarctica, but that was where they set up their base. And this picture here, I love it. You can see the ice freezing, you can see the pancake ice on the sea. And what really worries me is the guy who's sitting right on the edge. And I think, oh, if somebody said to my son, could you sit there while I take a picture? Just don't do it. But it's perched right on the edge of that cliff just to make a good photo. And it's a great photo, but yeah, it's what some people go to get a good photo. But you can see the depth of the ice on the edge of the continent, and this is Commonwealth Bay over in East Antarctica, and the gusts are about 250 miles per hour, and that's what those scientists, these explorers, put up with every day there. This is an original photo of the hut. You can see the penguins that had turned up to have a little look around, and this is Sir Douglas Mawson, the famous Australian explorer at Commonwealth Bay, at the windiest place on Earth. And if you go there today, if you wanted to go and visit this place, which is incredible to do so, you'll see that the hut is still there. So conditions in the Antarctic, it's so dry, it's so cold, there's there's nothing to rot the wood of these huts, so they're preserved. So you can go and see Douglas Mawson's hut, you can see where it's all been patched up because of the wind. They're constantly hammering planks in to keep it all together. And there is a replica of this hut in Australia as well, the museum that you can visit. But the real thing is there. And can you see how it's filled up with ice and snow that's kind of pouring out from the inside? So that's the windiest place in Antarctica. And then if we move on, as well as the coldest, the highest, the windiest place in the world, this is the thing that needs explanation. Antarctica is also the largest polar desert, so it's the driest continent. And you think, how on earth can that be? Because you've just, you know it's got the largest body of fresh water in the world, this huge amount of fresh water, but it is also a desert. So the ice is there. You can see that this is the McMurdo dry valleys, and this is an area of Antarctica which has an awful lot of dry, bare rock. So this looks quite different to the pictures that we've seen. But cold air doesn't hold very much water, as we know. So the cold air is very, very, very dry. And as most of our rain, if you know from where you look, most of the rain comes from the sea. So if you look at the Andes in South America, you can see that one side of the Andes has got the forests, on the other side you'll get a rain shadow where there's no, it's very dry, kind of like grass plains. And it's the same where I live in England. I live in the east of England. In the West Country, they get a lot of rain. By the time it comes over to us on the east, we're very dry. And it's the same kind of thing here in Antarctica. So the warm air doesn't reach the Antarctic because we've got this southern ocean, which is freezing cold air. So Antarctica gets very little precipitation. It gets very little moisture coming in from the warmer places. And combined with that the air is so cold, it just means there's very, very little precipitation, very little snow. And what the snow that does fall, it doesn't melt. It kind of builds up. So every single kind of snowflake that comes down on the continent gradually builds up and builds up and builds up. But it is the driest continent, and even though the rest of that water is locked up in the ice, so we don't count that. All we're counting is the number of snowflakes or the amount of precipitation that comes down. And it's kind of, areas of Antarctica are kind of similar to the Sahara Desert in the amount of moisture or precipitation that comes down. We are visiting the Antarctic Peninsula, which comes out into the ocean, so we get some more maritime weather coming to the peninsula. We do get more rain, more snow coming over that side. But the continent as a whole, polar desert, and the driest continent in the world. And these McMurdo valleys are incredible. So this is on the east of Antarctica, so it's away from where we're visiting, but incredible place to visit. So about 99% of the continent is covered by the ice sheet, but there are some areas where you can see the bare rock like this, and you can see the ice flow, this glacial ice that builds up over thousands, millions of years, flowing down through the McMurdo valleys. And if you look from space, you can see the valleys in the middle, this driest place in the world. And we think that these are the closest we get to being on another planet. These are incredible hostile areas. So those scientists will often test out things that they would use on Mars, because we think this is the closest kind of environment to Mars that you could get. But it's not free of life. There is life living there, believe it or not. Even in these kind of places, you will have microorganisms, you'll have bacteria, algae living inside the ice, living underneath the glaciers, living inside the rocks. There's photosynthetic bacteria, algae living inside the rocks. So even in these incredible hostile places, there will be life living there. So it's an incredible place to learn about. And near the McMurdo Dry Valleys, this is the McMurdo Station, and this is the main American coastal scientific station in Antarctica. So just kind of to sum up a little bit, as we've seen, Antarctica is like no other continent at all. It is the highest, it's the driest, it's the coldest, and it is the windiest continent on Earth. So it really is quite an extraordinary place to go and visit. And certainly for me, sometimes you feel like you've gone back to the last ice age. You often feel like you're leaving the modern world and you're travelling back in time when you get there. So it's an incredible experience to go there. And as I said, if you look at this enormous ice sheet here, it's not kind of a static lump of ice. So it's not just sitting there as one big lump of ice. It's constantly flowing north. So it's like a big continent-sized, unrestrained glacier that is moving out towards the edges. And the ice, the snow that falls on the South Pole, takes about 100,000 years to flow out to the edges of the continent before it drops off. So just to finish off, we can look at what kind of happens around the Antarctic. And most of the Antarctic ends in these big ice shelves all the way around. So this is what you would see if you sailed all the way around the Antarctic. A lot of what you'd see are these big ice shelves. Which is different to what we're going to see. We're going to see more rocky scenery, we're going to see more wildlifey places, but this is what most of the continent looks like. So we're not really missing out on much by not going everywhere else. And occasionally you get these huge tabular icebergs that break away from the ice shelves around the continent. There are also glaciers all the way along the Antarctic Peninsula where we're going. So there's the smaller glaciers pouring down off the continent. They may be flowing at about 1 metre or 3 feet a day, so they can be coming down quite fast. And almost all of them are tidewater glaciers that come down into the sea. And the glaciers constantly calving, so we are seeing icebergs all the way around. So this is land ice that's come off of the continent, could be thousands of years old, and it will be floating all the way around where we see. So this is all the land ice that we see as icebergs around the continent. This is the sea ice, so this is what happens in the winter. The continent almost doubles in size and the ocean freezes all the way around Antarctica every year to about 1 metre or so in thickness, and then it melts again in the spring. This is the ship that I worked on. This is the James Clark Ross from the British Antarctic Survey ships, and my job was to record the sea ice. So this is kind of ploughing through some of the sea ice around the Antarctic. And the sea ice is really important because the sea ice melts in the spring. As I said, you get algae or have microorganisms living in the ice, and as the ice melts, that's released into the water. It provides nutrients, and the bigger creatures, the things like, that isn't life-size, by the way. Don't worry, they're tiny, tiny little things. They're not going to be jumping out at us as we go down there. So the krill, the tiny little creatures that live in the sea, they'll be feeding on the smaller phytoplankton, the phytoplankton, the zooplankton will feed on that, and you get this food chain right the way up to the amazing whales. The humpbacks will be feeding down there, the mothers and the babies come down from where they go to the warmer water to breed and to have their babies, which is very sensible, and then they come down to the Antarctic to feed on the krill and these very nutrient-rich cold waters down here. So blue whales, humpback whales we'll be looking out. Definitely we'll see the humpbacks feeding around the bays down there. And they're there in the summer because the ice has melted and the water is full of nutrients, and we have these big shoals of krill that they're mainly feeding on. And also the penguins. So these are king penguins from South Korea. I love this. You'd think that penguins would just know how to walk on ice, but they're like me, kind of stumbling about and sliding on the ice. So they're wonderful to watch. The best place for you guys will be when we go to the Falklands. You'll get up close to, well, as close as you can, but you can see the penguins you'll see them closer up so you can take photos of them. When we're in the Antarctic, when we see the penguins, they tend to be kind of porpoising in the water, so we see them as like little splashes in the water, but we get to see them in their natural environment. So we will definitely see plenty of penguins down there. And beautiful, beautiful to see. Most of the markings of the penguins are on their head because it's the head that's above the water. So we'll see the different types of penguins when we're down there. And the other thing, the final thing that I find amazing about Antarctica, apart from the wildlife, apart from all these facts and figures about how extraordinary the continent is that after the Second World War, when the Antarctic Treaty was formed, the continent is designated as a continent for science. And being a scientist myself, I think this is incredible, and it's to do with sharing information, and scientists from all different nationalities all around the world working together, mainly on science that is to do with the Antarctic, science that you can only do down there, things to do with the climate, things to do with whatever. Sometimes they do stuff to do with space travel, because they can only do it down there. So it's incredible science, and it's shared between the different countries, the different nationalities. You can see the red markings just show you where some of the different science bases are. So they're spread out over the whole of the continent. And just to give you kind of a flavour of the different nationalities that make up the Antarctic Treaty, it's the most often called the most successful treaty in the world. It kind of runs indefinitely. And these are two of the British stations, Rothera Station and Halley Station. There's the Chinese station, the Great Wall Station, Armenton Scott Station, the American station, which is located at the South Pole. There's the Russian station, Vostok, near where we saw the lake, where they've been drilling down there. So all these different countries working together, sharing the information on Antarctica, and that is all based on something called the Antarctic Treaty, which we're going to be talking about more as we go on in the cruise. And the cruise ships, the Antarctic tourism, we're part of the story of Antarctica. The cruise ships work together to form an organisation called IATO, which is the International Association of Antarctic Tour Operators. And you would have seen around the ship, there's posters telling you about how you could be an ambassador, the sorts of things you can do. So we're also going to talk about this as we go through the cruise. So it's an international organisation. We've got more than 100 companies across the world, and the idea is to advocate, promote and practice safe and environmentally responsible private sector tourism to the Antarctic. So when we're in the Antarctic, we need to stick to the rules that IATO tell us about when we go down there. And being on a big ship like this, we're not making landings. We do the whole thing without making a footprint in the Antarctic. But we are going to have the most amazing time down there. I'm very excited. I've been down there lots and lots and lots of times, but it's still an incredible place to visit. And yeah, if you've got any questions at all, I'm always around the ship, so please always feel free to come and ask any questions, or at the end of the session here. But thank you so much for coming. Very happy Christmas to you all, and I will see you soon.